Hi.
and resume.
I am recording, yes.
Okay, so it's letting you. Okay,
We are recording. So,
move forward, and I'm sure others will be joining us. I hope they will anyway, and everything. Do you want to open up, Dr. Stone?
I will just welcome everyone. We're so glad you are with us tonight and hanging in there. And let me mute everyone if I remember how to do that. All right, can everyone hear me now? Just kind of wave at me, you can. All right, well, we're glad you're joining us, and I hope you survived the storm. I hope the damage was nothing as we go into hurricane season, realizing that a lot of folks were very lucky that this one didn't, and blessed that this one did not visit the Carolinas as bad as it could have. But it is early in the season, so just keep your fingers crossed, and let's just hope that everything works out well. I do bring you greetings from Gardner-Webb University. It's beautiful here, 93 degrees and sunny, and we are going into week 3 of your 601 class, so we are delighted that you're going on this journey with us. And at that point, I'm just going to turn it over to Dr. Stedman. And Dr. Revis, anytime you want to jump in, please just let me know, and we'll certainly honor that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Stone, let's talk about, just briefly, because I know that it's on their mind, let's talk about the work that was submitted to us Sunday night. First of all, I want to say that overall, and I was looking at 3 classes of students. Overall, I was very, very pleased with the quality and the caliber of work that came in. My feedback to them was, it was all things that were fixable. Many of them went ahead and it was not a long turnaround before they were already sending it back with the revisions that I made. I do want to point out to them, and Dr. Stone, you chime in anytime,
Okay.
that you will get feedback with all of this work. You'll get quick turnaround feedback from Dr. Stone and from me. And if we tell you that this needs to be done, and I don't want this to sound cocky or over, it needs to be done. We've looked at it. You need to fix that. Now, the peer reviews, and we'll talk about that a little more too, the peer reviews are important, but remember they're your peers. And while you take it and it's valued, it's valued information, you may look at what somebody tells you and you may say, I don't quite agree with that. You don't have to tell them that, but you have a right to say, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think I've done okay with that. And you can opt to take their suggestions and use it, or you don't have to. It's feedback. And while we want it to be the best feedback that you can give, it does not mean that from your peer that you have to necessarily use that. However, if it comes from Dr. Stone, if it comes from me, if it comes from Dr. Revis, if it comes from Dr. Lamb, that's a non-negotiable. Now, if you have a question about it and you don't understand it, then you communicate back with us. But what we give you is a non-negotiable. It is a non-negotiable with, you can do what you want to with the feedback from your peers, and a lot of it is excellent. Dr. Stone, I have already gotten students turning in their peer reviews. It's probably some of the best peer reviews that I have seen in 7 years almost. I am extremely pleased with the caliber and the time that they're taking. So I'm not minimizing what you're doing. It's very important, and you're doing an excellent job. But you need to remember that they're your peers, and you determine how much of that you want to use in changing your document. But what Dr. Stone and I give you, or Dr. Revis, then you must adhere to those changes, because that is what we're going to look for when you turn that final product in, for that final grade. So, Dr. Stone, anything you want to say on that?
Yes, I do. We've had a question. If they didn't get any feedback on task 1, do we assume that no revisions need to be made, or will feedback still be shared? you should get feedback. So if perhaps it was just recently added and we haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but to that point, even if it's coming from me, or I'm sure Dr. Steadman does the same, if it's 100, I'll say good job. I mean, I'm going to put some feedback down there. And if once, and for me, Dr. Steadman, maybe if you tell me if it's different for you, but for me, if you turn in something, I'm going to give you a 100 if it's a great job and you've done a great job, and I will comment on that. Great job, you're on the right track, go to task 2. Now, if I give you an 80, I will always say, here's what you need to do to make it 100. Here, you need to add 2 more references. You need to buffer up and make this a stronger argument here. You will always get feedback. And if you get that 80, that means all you need to do is to go back to that, make the changes and resubmit it. I will get it back and will immediately read it. And if you've done what I've asked, it'll certainly go up to 100. So you should always get feedback from us. And if it's less than 100 and you want to get 100 and it's coming from us, then you need to resubmit with those corrections.
And I'm going to take it a step further. If it's less than 100, I expect you to resubmit. That's a non-negotiable. We expect you to resubmit, and there is no reason for you not to get 100 on that assignment. That is the opportunity for you to work on it until you get it right. And by the time you get there, if you do what we're asking you to do, when you submit it for that final grade, then you've automatically got 100 in there. You've got your 100 points. We have got it set up so that that if you do what we ask you to do, honestly, there is no reason for you not to be able to get that. So just please adhere to that. And again, if there should not have been any of my students that didn't get feedback from me, and if you did, you need to let me know, because that would have been an oversight on my part, because I always give feedback on that kind of work. So please let me know, and I'm sure Dr. Stone would want.
Yes, absolutely. As well. And to your point too, the 100 is the minimum standard, so you need to make sure you shoot for that 100. I mean,
right.
And it's easy to get with the instructions that we give you. So, all right, but they've done great work. I mean, I've been extremely impressed.
Okay, and with that in mind, let's look. We are in week 3, so this is just a reminder of, again, what by Sunday of this week, this is what you should be working on this week. And let's look to the right and what is in red. The Absol Task 1 revisions due to the instructor. This is, now we've already done our feedback on it, and unless you need to send it back into, and you put it right back where you submitted it the first time if you want us to look at it again. Well, you can multiple attempts there, but when it goes to the assignment Dropbox, that's a one-shot deal there, and when you put it in there, that's where we're going to give you the final grade. Now, we've told you what to do. If you fail to do it when it gets there, then Dr. Stone and I have no choice but to grade what you've put in there. Now, we may send it back and tell you that you still didn't adhere to what we told you to do, but the grade there will stay whatever it is whenever we put the grade in there. So please, if you listen to us and do what we ask you to do, by the time it gets to there should be no problems. So this coming Sunday night, and you don't have to wait until Sunday night. Anytime that during the week that you're ready to drop that into the Dropbox, Dr. Stone and I will continue to look, and we'll go ahead and give you a grade, and you can move on. So, there's no problem with that. Again, your Absol Task 1 peer reviews, you must do 2 with from the people in your group, and many of the students have already completed that activity, but if you have not, then at least by Sunday afternoon you must have completed those two peer reviews using the information in Blackboard. And then again, Task 2, draft, and I'm going to go over that again this evening very quickly. Task 2 draft is due in Blackboard's discussion board as well, and we will give you feedback on that. Within 24 hours, you will have feedback from us, and then your peers can look at it and comment on it as well. One other thing under week 3, if you have not, you need to go ahead and establish your Zoom account. It's a free Zoom account. Your team needs to go ahead, and somebody needs to take the lead on this, and you need to go ahead and set up a practice Zoom session where your team gets together, you collaborate, you feel comfortable with with how you're going to do this, because in week 5, you actually have to, there's an assignment that we'll talk about later on that you have to do with your Zoom team. So we don't want you to wait until the last week to have that set up and then to not understand what you're doing. So go ahead, work with your Zoom team. I would say try to get together sometime this week and practice that. You don't have to send us anything. Dr. Stone and I don't need to know. You just need to take the lead, and you need to be comfortable with that and know how to do it. However, if you run into a problem, you need to let us know and we'll talk you through it. With that in mind, Dr. Stone, go ahead with your topic, and then I'll come back with some talking more about the task 2 and 3 later on.
All right. Do you want to stop sharing and let me?
Yes, let me stop share. Well, let me do this. Let me minimize that and stop share. Okay, now.
Okay. So, here it is. What I want to talk to you about tonight is this report. So I'm going to make it into a slideshow, and basically, as you start working on your AppSell Task 2, Task 3, one of the things that you're going to be asked to kind of look at is, I've lost everybody. Is everybody still there? Hang on, let me make.
You're at the top, yeah.
Okay, so everybody can see my screen. Is that right, Dr. Stedman?
Yeah, we can see you, yes.
Okay, all right, so the demographic changes. I want to talk about that because as you begin to look at this product, this evidence that we're asking you to work on, you will, and your PLCs, you'll start talking and breaking down data, disaggregate your data by subgroups. And one of the things that we talk about in week 3 is some of the demographic changes affecting the schools in North and South Carolina. And I'm taking this from Dr. Johnson. He's a University of North Carolina Chapel Hill professor. He does a lot of demographic studies, and he talks about some of the trends coming to public schools that's going to already are here, but are going to continue to become larger trends in the public schools in North Carolina. Now, a lot of his research is geared toward North Carolina, but it also is can be replicated in South Carolina. So I want to share some of his points that he made, and I won't take long, but I want to answer some questions as well. Dr. Johnson, the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill, has been studying the trends of demographics in North Carolina and the South and South Carolina for the last 10 years. And a part of those trends he shares, and as he goes through his report, there are 2 of them in particular, 3 of them that I really want to talk to you about. But he says over the next century, over the next 10 years, even more so, there are going to be 6 trends that really affect public schools and universities in North and South Carolina and in the South. And the first and foremost one that I want to talk about, because you're already seeing this in your schools, is the browning of America. That's one. The silver tsunami, which is basically that we're becoming an older and older population. And even though you may not think that really impacts us in public education, it does. As we become an older generation, we become, as research has shown, that people become a little bit more distracted or distanced from their public school systems if they don't have children or grandchildren anymore. The South shall rise again, population growth in the South, and then there are 3 that we really won't talk about, and that is that people are coming from more and more non-traditional marrying situations. Women are becoming a dominant force in the workforce as well as in the social force, and then more and more people are depending on grandma and grandpa. So I really want to talk about a couple of the trends that affect us in the public schools of North Carolina and South Carolina. And the first one is the browning of America. Now, it's the browning of America. It's an immigration, and it's about the population change that is coming because of immigration, legal and illegal, in the South. So this first chart shows you the number of immigrants in millions and of the years in which they have been coming to the United States. So I don't care how you feel about the political, where we are in politics now about immigration, but when these children show up on our steps, this population of people coming to the United States illegally or illegally, they're coming, they're children, and we in the public system have an obligation to teach everybody that comes through our door, whether they're legally here or illegally here. So the population trend for the United States in 2014, 42 million immigrants populating into the population for the population of the United States. And you can see that the trend has continued. And if the statistics for 16, 17, and 18 were here, you would see that that continues to be. So what this really means And the reason why it's important for us as we begin to look at our school improvement teams, our PLCs, and our recommendations for plans is that we need to take in consideration that our population is becoming less and less of the traditional population we've had over the last 50 years. When you continue to look at it, he looks at North Carolina in particular, but when you see the non-white and Hispanic shares of the population growth since 2000 to 2010, you will see from the United States, the population, what the average population and how much the non-white share is and how much the Hispanic share. And in North Carolina, you can see that our Hispanic population continues to be 28.3% of the share of growth. 61% non-white and 28.3% Hispanic. When you look at the populations by race for the United States, you'll see that the non-white Hispanic continues to be a higher percentage than white or African American, which have been our traditional populations.
Dr. Stone,
Yes.
we cannot see your charts.
Oh my. All right, let me get out of this. I'm glad you stopped me.
Okay, I thought that was on purpose. I didn't know.
Oh no, I want you to see my charts. All right, so can you see them now? Can you see this chart?
No.
No, you've got to hit you got to hit share. Have you hit share?
What I did. I'm sorry, guys. Now can you see it?
Yes, yes.
All
now
right,
you
I'm
can.
sorry. All
And
right, so
also, Dr. Stone, let them know that it's under week 3 in their in their Blackboard as well.
it is under week 3 and has been open, so you can certainly bring it up and look at it. And I apologize for looking at it, but there are the 6 trends. The first couple charts are showing you how the population of the United States, South Carolina, North Carolina, is browning. More and more Hispanic students are coming to us. That's going to impact your school improvement plans. That's going to impact everything that you do as a PLC, is that particular browning of America. So let me just go down to where I was. So when you start looking at the total populations of the United States, you'll see the median age for the populations. You'll see that non-white, this is the median age of U.S. populations by race, Hispanic origin, and gender. You'll see that our Hispanic population, which is the browning of America, that the population tends to be much younger than the average for the United States, which means they have the younger childbearing ages. So our browning population, our immigrant population, are the populations that are going to continue to have more and more children. They're a younger population. So they're going to be more and more of the school-age child population. When you look at births in the United States by race and ethnicity, you'll see that in 2011, almost 50% of the births in the United States were by white. African Americans make up 15%, 26% for Hispanic. What you are seeing here is a trend of more and more less white population births, less African American births by a small percentage, but a huge increase in the number of Hispanic populations live births. You'll also see that multi-race or other is also increasing. But the biggest increase is this here, the Hispanic population. And those are children that, although they're born in 2011, they'll be in our schools within a relative short period of time. The population from 2000, what the projected population of the United States by race, you will see that by 2050, our Latino or Hispanic population will outnumber our African American population and Asian population. Again, what you're seeing here is a huge decrease in the population of white, African American population, a slight increase, but a huge, tremendous increase in the number of Hispanics. Now again, all of this doesn't matter how you feel about the immigration issue. What it really means is that those little boys and girls will be coming to your schoolhouse door. And you as a principal or an assistant principal are going to adapt, because that's what we do in public schools. We open our doors for everyone who comes through them. We don't discriminate based on their language. We don't discriminate based on their poverty level. If they come to our door, legally or illegally, we will educate them. So,
well, the school is the Statue of Liberty on Ellis Island.
Absolutely, it is it's the fair playing. It gives us all that level playing.
That's right. That's right.
when you look at, particularly for North Carolina public schools, when you look at the projections for Hispanic, white, and African American, the last year he did was 2015-16. And again, all this going toward the browning of the population of our school students. You'll see, again, remarkable decrease in white, African American pretty much holding steady, Latino increasing. So that's the browning. One more piece, and that has to do with the composition of the North Carolina Public Schools by enrollment. 2015, there are 1.4 million students in North Carolina Public Schools, and you can see what's happening. You can, as far as the two in yellow are the populations that are growing the most, compare them to the last, his benchmark was 2000, 2001. You can see the public schools have grown by almost 180,000 students, but you really see the population growth here in these two categories. So that's the browning, and that's why when you start putting together your plan, your PLC starts talking, you really need to have some honest discussions about English as a second language, those students who bring an understanding of the culture of immigrants in our public schools, and some of the fear that we now have because of the political climate. Now, the second big trend he talks about is the silver tsunami coming, which basically means that those of us with silver hair, gray hair, we are becoming more and more of the population of the United States. Now, what that implication that has for public schools is that we don't produce children anymore. We may have grandchildren, but as we get older and we have more and more of a disconnect with the public schools. So as you become a principal or assistant principal, it is critical that you reach out to this silver population. It is critical that you reach out to the grandmothers and the granddaddies, but not only them, the ones in your community who don't have grandchildren in your school system. And if you're in a school system that relies on the public to help you with your funding, like you in South Carolina, have to vote on your South Carolina, you call it a Danny, what do they call it in South Carolina? It's a millage, your millage rate. In North Carolina, it's a little different, but we need this particular population.
Right.
But they are, as you can see in the United States, our population of school-age children is still pretty steady, but we're getting older. The average life expectancy, as you can see, this is a part of the trend that he shares, that we're getting older. We now expect to live to be 78. Lucky us. And finally, when you break it down to North Carolina, and which would be very similar to the state of South Carolina, you can see that by far the largest population of the state of North Carolina is 45 to 65. Here are the childbearing, just less than 25. Those are the ones who are producing children for our public schools. Those are the ones that will be coming through your door. Scary. The next highest population are those of us on Social Security. And those are really, and this is critical to you when you get your principalship or when you start developing your plans for your school to be that phenomenal school, it's critical you reach out to these populations. They're your volunteers, they're your mentors. They're also the ones who are going to support you in a bond referendum, support you whenever you need them. They'll proctor your exams for you, even if they don't have children. The last one I want to talk about is poverty, because a part of one of his 6 major trends about is that poverty is going to continue to be a persistent, and with that population, which is the population in poverty, this is a population, not poverty. Let me get to poverty. Here's poverty. Well, let me show you. That's the population. When you look at poverty, poverty is going to be consistently a problem in the United States and will continue to grow. And if you could draw North Carolina and South Carolina in here, you would see extreme pockets of poverty. Northeast North Carolina, some of the coastal down country, I think low country of South Carolina have high concentrations of poverty and will continue to have high concentrations of poverty. So those kids coming through your doors are not going to be richer. They're not going to have more resources as we develop. So what I wanted to do is to leave you. Really, the reason I want to do this PowerPoint is that it goes well with your chapter 3. It goes well with what you should have been reading in your lessons or your books. But it is also important to understand as you start developing your plans and you develop your leadership style to be aware of the trends of what's happening in our country and in our state. I do want to leave you there some great resources if you're from South Carolina and you want some really good census data about the South Carolina population as well as your education population, where the trends are in South Carolina there. That is, here is North Carolina's, the same. If you want to look at the United States, there's a resource there. and I finish up with the 4 resources that I use for this particular PowerPoint. This man is wonderful. Dr. Johnson, if you ever get a chance, Dr. Stedman, Dr. Revis, you may have heard him at a school board conference or at a ASA conference or something, but he is phenomenal as far as keeping an eye on it, on what's happening in the country as far as public schools. He also does some great job talking to business leaders about how they should be evolving as well. So he's great looking at the trends, but I encourage you, if you are in South Carolina and you need some data for your any of your evidences, or as you move along in the MELS program or you go into the doctoral program, here are some great resources for census data for your state and again for the nation. And with that, are there any questions? And I'm sorry I haven't had the chat on. Are there any questions for me? I guess you've been answering those, Dr. Stedman.
No, I have. I've been paying attention to you. Sorry.
All right. Well, I will stop sharing and give it back to you. But I do want to I thank you, and I apologize about the chart. I thank you, Dr. Revis, for telling me about that. I was just going on. I would have finished my presentation. You all would never see it.
Well, I was waiting, but anyway, that is some great information. I did look at the chat areas. I think a lot of them have been taken care of. But if you would, while I'm going, if you would just look at them and see if there's anything big that we need to talk about.
And again, I apologize that all you could see was me. The charts are so much nicer, so much better.
Okay. Let me pull this up. Okay. Can everybody see that? Can everybody see my app so helpful hints? Okay. I do want to point out, as I'm moving into week 3 and the requirements for week 3, while you have your template and you have all the other resources, this is the document that I want us to look at as it relates to what it is that you've got to do. Let's look at task 2, because that is where you currently are. Now, the thing to remember is that task 2 does have 2 different prompts. There's 2 different things, and some students in the past have gotten past prompt 1 and they just didn't look a little bit lower and didn't realize that there were 2 parts to task 2 that you have to do. So please be reminded that there are 2 parts that you have to do. Again, make sure that you read the description and the instructions carefully. I ask all of you at the very beginning, I said, make sure you read through everything first. And I will say that in the work that Dr. Stone and I reviewed this weekend, some of the things that we had to tell you to go back and do, I don't mind telling you, but honestly, you should have caught some of those things as you were looking at this document and looking at some of the highlighted areas. So I'm asking you, please go back and look at it carefully and try your best as much as possible to get it as right as you can the first time. Okay, I'm not going to insult your intelligence, but I am going to go over some things simply because I think it's important. When you see this, your heading is data collection strategies under task 2, prompt number 1. You're going to write that. Remember, we said if it's highlighted in yellow, that you're going to write that. Now, you're not going to highlight it in yellow. That's highlighted in yellow simply because we want to emphasize that. And that was one of the things in the previous task that we had to do, Dr. Stone. They forgot to go and take some of those directives out that shouldn't have been in there. Like Dr. Lamb had said right before the school profile, he said, you know, if it's in yellow, this is what you do. If it's in red, this is what you do. If it's in black, it stays there. That needs to come out. So those kinds of things, you should be cleaning it up along the way. So go back and fix that. But anyway, under the data collection strategies, this is what you do. You, the candidate, will work with the selected PLC team that you formed in task 1 to determine the strategies that will be used to collect the data to determine the most pressing need for improving student achievement. Remember, it is student achievement. It's not discipline. It's not anything else. You're dealing with student achievement. The narrative work for this selection will discuss those strategies. You're simply going to write about it. Write about those things that you and your team are coming up with. Again, make sure you address yourself as the candidate and you refer to the PLC as the PLC team. I had a few students that said I, me, we. That does not need to happen. So please make sure that this time that if you did that in task 1, you've corrected that, and that you don't let that happen in task 2. We'll looking to see that you have changed that this time. Number 2, again, the heading is criteria and process for identifying the most pressing need. Once the candidate and the team, you've determined those strategies, and number 1 that you're going to use for collecting data, you're going to decide what criteria and what process will be used for identifying the most pressing need. Actually, you're just looking at it a little more in detail when you get to number 2. Again, the narrative work for this section will discuss the criteria and the process. And again, it should not be I did this or we did this. It should be the candidate and the PLC team or something of that nature. Number 3, the heading, collaborative data analysis. And that collaborative word is important because that means that, again, that it's not by yourself. Once steps 1 and 2 have been completed, the candidate and the team will take a detailed look of all data that has been gathered. You should thoroughly, and this is what Dr. Stone was alluding to in his presentation, you should thoroughly disaggregate the data by looking at all groups, subgroups, etc. Make sure you cover every angle possible, and the narrative work for this selection will discuss this process. Number 4, that's when your heading is most pressing need. After you've done everything 1, 2, and 3, you've laid it out, you've torn it apart, you've dissected it as much as possible. Once step 3 has been completed, the candidate and the team will determine the most pressing need based on the collaborative data analysis is, you're going to identify. The narrative work for this section will identify the most pressing need and why it's the most pressing need. Now, remember what I told you last week. You may decide, well, this is the most pressing need. Whenever you go to your site administrator or your site supervisor or your principal probably already knows that. They may say, yes, and we want you to do ... and they're going to spell it out for you. But the most pressing need may already be fully addressed in other things that the school is already doing. And the principal may say, while this is the most pressing need, this is also much a need, and this is what I want you to work with. Now, if that's what the principal says, guess what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to do what your principal wants you to do, and that becomes what you work on, moving forward with your action plan and what you're going to do to improve student achievement at your school. But you're going to present that information to your principal, and y'all are going to talk about it, and they're going to help. He or she's going to help decide what to do. Now, again, in prompt 1, now this is where you go to task 2, prompt 2. This is the second part of task 2. In prompt 1, everything that you've done is going to be narrative work. You've got those headings. You're going to write about what you and the team are doing. In prompt 2, everything that you talked about in prompt 1, you're going to graphically represent it in task 2. This is going to be, and a lot of this information comes from the test data results. When the state sends back the test data results for that school year, it comes already in charts and graphs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes all you've got to do is just copy and paste that information. But we need a visual representation of everything that you're talking about as much as possible from task 1. And remember, please remember to identify your graphic work as figures according to APA. Please remember that all graphics should include a narrative explanation of what is being presented. Dr. Stone and I should not look at something and say, APA tells you how to do that. And so we should be able to look at that. You don't need a large narrative, but there should be a description of every graphic that you use in prompt number 2. Once you get through with that, your next heading should be references, if that is applicable. And then your last one should be appendices. And remember, at a minimum, every time you should have an agenda of meeting with your PLC. You should have minutes of that meeting, and anything else that would be applicable to your appendices should be placed under there. Once task 2, prompts 1 and 2 are complete, both of them, don't send part of it, again, like Dr. Lamb said, to Dr. Stone and me and say, well, will you look and see where I am at this point? We want to see everything. You're going to submit it again to Blackboard discussion board, and that is where Dr. Stone and I are going to give you comments, as well as your peers can also look at that and give comments as well. I will tell you, you have access to looking at that section as well. You can see what we're saying, and if you need ideas, it's okay to look at it and say, oh, I didn't quite understand that part, but this is what so-and-so did, and it may enlighten you on what to do. We know that you can see everything, even our comments there, but it's not meant to be punitive. This is the time that you can keep on doing it until you get it right. So, Dr. Stone, anything you want to say about that before I move on?
You know, I think
task 3.
I think that's a critical point too, in that we are looking for, I mean, Dr. Stebbin has really spelled it out for you. So if you follow this format, it is easy to follow. It's easy for those of us who are looking for these particular items. So it's really laid out there. Follow this format. Follow it with fidelity, and you'll do well.
Okay, this has been asked. You are not required to do a video, but it's highly recommended. Again, these become artifacts for you. However, I would say that, you know, I would always have somebody to take a picture of me presenting, because this is always proof. It's proof if you ever need proof. Yes, I did work with this group, and this is what I did. So, you know, you should also have a PowerPoint and an agenda for the presentation. You're gonna present this to. I'm sorry. Once task 2, prompts 1 and 2 are complete, you are to schedule a meeting with your principal or your leadership team to present the findings. You are not required to do a video, but it is highly recommended. However, you should have a picture of you presenting at a minimum. You should also have a PowerPoint and an agenda for the presentation. This will be included in the work you will submit for grading. Now, when you put this into your work that you're going to submit for us to review and finally for a final grade, we don't want a link of a PowerPoint. We need to see the actual PowerPoint slides embedded in your work. So don't put the link in there, because I'm not going to click on it and Dr. Stone's not going to click on it. We don't have time. You can put the link in there, you know, for reference, but we want to actually see the slides embedded in your work that you submit for us to look at. Dr. Stone, before I go to task 3, anything else that you want to say about that?
No, that's exactly.
Okay. Okay, let's quickly go on and look at task 3, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think that there are some that are going to be ready to begin working on this before we even get there, Dr. Stone. So I think that you need to always know ahead of time, you know, how all of this ties together and how it links. Again, make sure you read the description and instructions carefully. Once you've done, you've completed task 1 and 2, successfully presented to the principal leadership team, you can move forward to task 3. Your focus in prompt 1 will be the identified need in task 2. Candidates will create an annotated bibliography. And remember, last week when Dr. Stone was sharing some of the resources in Blackboard, remember We showed you where you could go and you could see, according to Purdue OWL, how to do an annotated bibliography. We have also placed some additional resources under your APSL template and material section that further talks about annotated bibliographies versus regular bibliographies. So make sure that you avail yourself to those resources. Again, you're going to create an annotated bibliography that is featured in the narrative to evidence and illustrate resources for best practices in that identified area that you, in task 2 that you identified, including a section that's going to feature online tools to support the teacher and student. In this, you're going to include a minimum of 5 regular resources and a minimum of 3 online resources. The online resources are to be technology research-based programs, and I just gave some examples. Some of these are older examples. I'm sure that you've got some that are much more updated than some of the ones I've listed, but Study Island, Edmentum, Plato Accelerated Reader, all of those are examples of things, and it would be anything else. And we want to see some things in addition to what you're currently using, because you're going to present to your administration, you know, these are some additional things that if the monies were available, that we could use to help us make a difference in student achievement. Again, everything that you do should be geared towards improving student achievement in that identified area that you identified in task 2. All resources must reflect your identified need and could assist as a strategy for helping alleviate the need. You are to complete this according to APA. And again, I've talked about where the materials are. Again, task 3 has 2 prompts. Prompt 2, you will complete a mini research section on the best practices for your identified problem. You must have a minimum of 3 references, and the work must be completed according to APA. Again, you're asking, well, how is this different from what I've already done, you know, with you know, what is a PLC, et cetera, et cetera. You're focusing on your identified need at this point. You know, what research is out there? What are they saying about your identified need? What are the researchers saying, some of the things that you can do, that you can implement in your school, that would be good towards moving forward to eliminating that problem that you have identified in task 2. Please note in the prompt directives that the candidate is responsible for detailing how the PLC created and used multiple graphic organizers. There's a lot of stuff embedded in here, and visuals such as charts, graphs, tables, timelines, etc. These things are to be embedded in the narrative work from number 1 above to demonstrate how the PLC projects that the chosen best practice strategy might be applicable to the need. This is making reference to the annotated bibliography and online resources from task 1. I know I went over this hurriedly. You need to read it, you need to understand it, you need to wrap your head around it as you are even working on task 2 this week. And next week, we will go into much more detail with the requirements for task 3. Anything that you would like to say, Dr. Stone, at this time?
Dr. Stedman, I think you did a great job on it. And again, it's just simply following the prompts.
Okay. Dr. Revis, do you have any comments that you would like to make up to this point?
Not really. I just want to reemphasize the importance of organizing your task in this order. It just makes it so much easier, not only for our instructors, but for your evaluators, to make sure that we're not missing critical pieces of your writing.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Revis, for that comment as well. Dr. Lamb, have you joined us?
I don't think he's next
Okay.
door, and I hear him
Okay.
talking, Dr. Stedman.
Okay, that's okay. He said he might not be able to, and and he'll pick up on Thursday night with anything that he needs to do. I do want to remind you at this point, you should be if you have not had a visit by your clinical coach one, or if you have not heard from your clinical coach one at this point, you need to let Dr. Stone know. It's okay to let me know, and I can let you need to let one of us know if you have not heard from that individual, because at this point, everybody should have either had a visit or have a visit scheduled, or you should know that somebody is coming. So please let us know if that has not happened. You should already on your own have established a relationship with your principal, so that, and you should already be actively involved in your clinical internship. Remember, we don't want you doing 80 hours of the same thing. We want you to have a diversity of activities and leadership opportunities that you're going to be involved in. So please make sure that you are making yourself available. They're busy people. Your principals are busy people. You need to reach out to them. And, many times it's simply, you may want to leave them a note, send them an email, a message, just say, when you get a second, can I have 5 minutes of your time? And that will prompt them to get with you. But you take it upon yourself to reach out to them, and you make yourself available, and you be the leader every opportunity that you can without invading their territory.
And I think that's
any comments on
important,
that, Dr. Stone?
Dr. Shepard, I think that's so important, because I've had a couple of questions on the chat about what happens if your principal is going in a different direction. Remember, the best way to sell this is you're doing something to help him and or her and the school by creating this PLC, by addressing the focus. So it's really, you're adding value to your school. So it should never be seen as something that the principal is worried about, or the principal is, in any way sees as an adversarial situation. But it's always a helpful tool. But it is most important that you keep him or her informed. I would, even after you start having a PLC, I would certainly make it in there the next day to say, hey, here's what we talked about, the complete transparency. And then that way you can get a feel, so you're not completely surprised when the principal comes up and, oh, sorry, hang on, let me, all right, Danny, I'm sorry, I've got something else.
Okay, let me.
All right, I've stopped it. Well, I've stopped it. So,
Okay.
to that point, it's just a matter of making sure that your principal's aware. So even after you've had that PLC meeting, a courtesy, here's what we talked about. And so you won't be surprised when he or she says, no, this is our most pressing need, because that's what you're going to have to address, is what they asked you to address. So usually 99% of the time you're going to be on the same board, on the same plane, but just keep them informed. I think that would be a courtesy. It also puts you in the principal's sights as a future leader. That person's going to be extremely beneficial to your career.
Right. And one of the things that in my visits, and again, candidates, you can actually take this initiative yourself. One of the things that I do when I'm sitting down with the candidate and with the principal is that I point out to them, we realize that in most any school that there are, you've got an identified area of need, but there's always more than one need in a school. And I can tell you, as a former principal, and Dr. Revis was, and Dr. Stone, we were all former principals, there were things we always had to put on the back burner. And you've heard of that before. You know why? There just was not enough time in the day. There weren't enough resources, enough people. And this is an opportunity to present yourself as being that back burner. You can take something off the back burner while you are in this program, and you can help your principal do something that they want to do. They just don't have the time and the resources to do it. You can become that resource, and you can sell yourself that way. That's how you can approach it. I want to be somebody that can take a burden off of you, that I can lighten the load a little bit. How can I do that? Okay, any comments, Dr. Revis, on that? Or
Nope.
Or Dr. Stone, anything? Okay.
No, sorry, I was just responding to.
Okay, that's okay. I'm just saying, as a former principal, you know, these candidates can be very, very valuable as additional resources for this next year.
Absolutely.
Almost definitely. And I want to go back and reiterate what Dr. Stone said. I think it was Dr. Stone about you need to build that relationship with that principal. That principal will make or break you as far as recommendations in your future career. So you need to be on the same page. Even if it's not your page, you have to get on the page of your principal. And that's just the way it is. And you've got to make yourself invaluable to them.
And if you're in a small district or in a district you've been there all your life, that principal is going to be the best resource for you. And if they see you as someone who's a problem solver and a go-getter, that's the best recommendation you're going to get when that off-the-record conversation happens between two principals and they're looking for the next assistant principal. That's going to get you the job.
That is absolutely true. Again, I think we've covered, Dr. Stone, everything. Again, I need to remind you that we need you as much as possible to be back on board with us on Thursday night. And I think we have this Thursday night, and then we have next Thursday night as well. And then we will back off and give you a little bit of break for a few Thursday nights, and we'll just be coming online on Tuesday nights, for a while. And we'll kind of check the pulse of things. And if we need to come back on, we will, but we'll kind of play it by ear and see what we need to do with that. But the next 2 weeks are going to be vitally important. So please join with us as much as possible. I'm sure Dr. Lamb will have a lot of extra stuff that he's going to want to present on Thursday night that will be vitally important. I don't know where we are with Task Stream yet, but I think that he was working, Dr. Stone, towards trying to do something by Thursday night with them on Task Stream. So I don't know. That may be. We'll just wait and see. But
he's working hard on it.
Do what?
He's working very hard on it.
That's what I thought.
And just real quickly, I want to finish up by reminding people that if you want feedback, go to My Grades. That's where your feedback section from your instructor will be on the right side. And that's where you can resubmit as well under My Grades.
Okay. Do you think we have addressed everything that they have needed responses to, Dr. Revis and Dr. Stone?
I think so. Does anybody have anything to ask?
Okay. And they know how they can send us a email if they have a question that was not answered tonight. Usually I have 4 or 5 every night after a class, and I respond back to them before I go to bed that night. So, but anyway. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much for a good class tonight. Dr. Stone, thank you for everything. Dr. Revis, thank you for your input, and I look forward to seeing you on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock.
Good night, everyone. Stay safe.
Okay.
Good night.
And you'll get it later. You'll get your this video recording later on tonight. Dr. Stone's recording it, and he'll send it to me, and then I'll send it out to my classes. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Stone, Dr. Revis.
Thank you.